Most people misunderstand what actually causes reality to change. They think it happens after effort, repetition, or time. But the fastest shifts you've ever experienced did not come from trying harder. They came from moments where something suddenly made sense. In those moments, you didn't push. You didn't convince yourself. You didn't force belief. You simply saw something clearly. And after that, things were never quite the same. That is not coincidence. That is mechanism. Understanding is not passive. It is not neutral. When you truly understand something, your internal position changes instantly. You stop relating to life from the same emotional and psychological posture. And because the quantum field does not respond to words or intentions, but to states, that shift is immediately mirrored back to you. This video only does something if you understand it. Not because it contains power, but because understanding removes distortion. The moment confusion drops, the signal you are sending into the field stabilizes. When the signal stabilizes, the field reorganizes without delay. There is no waiting period for recognition. There is no processing time for clarity. Most people are constantly broadcasting effort. Effort to improve. Effort to heal. Effort to attract. That effort is not wrong, but it carries an assumption: something is missing. The field reflects assumptions, not goals. So it keeps mirroring situations that require more effort. This is why trying often feels like resistance. Because it is. Understanding removes the assumption of lack. When you understand how something actually works, you stop pushing against it. Your nervous system relaxes. Your emotional charge settles. And that settling is the instruction. The field is not impressed by desire. It is calibrated by coherence. This is why true understanding feels grounding, not exciting. It feels like things clicking into place. Like something unnecessary dropping away. In that moment, you are no longer attempting to influence reality. You are aligned with how it already operates. And alignment is what the field responds to every time. Nothing mystical is happening here. No energy is being summoned. No force is being applied. An internal contradiction dissolves. And without contradiction, the field has nothing to push back against. It reflects clarity the same way it reflects confusion. Instantly. If you notice a sense of steadiness as you hear this, that is not imagination. That is the beginning of recognition. And recognition is enough. Not because it creates effort, but because it ends it. From that ending, response becomes automatic. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Desire feels powerful, but it is not the signal the field responds to. Wanting is movement towards something you believe is not here. And that belief is the message. The quantum field does not evaluate how badly you want something. It reflects the position you are operating from while you want it. If that position is lack, effort, or pursuit, the field mirrors more situations that keep you in that posture. This is why visualizing, affirming, and forcing often produce inconsistent results. They are not wrong actions, but they are usually performed from an identity that is trying to become something else. Trying is not neutral. Trying assumes separation. And separation is coherence of absence. The field is precise. It reflects coherence, not intention. Recognition works differently. Recognition is not movement toward a future outcome. It is a settling into what is already understood as true. When recognition occurs, the nervous system relaxes. The emotional charge drops. The internal argument ends. You are no longer pushing reality to change, because something fundamental has already shifted in how you see yourself in relation to it. At the identity level, recognition sounds like this: this is how it works. Not as a belief, but as a felt certainty. And the moment that certainty stabilizes, behavior changes without effort. Emotional tone changes without management. Choices reorganize without planning. The field responds to that reorganization instantly, because identity is the broadcast. Desire says, I will be whole when this arrives. Recognition says, I see what was never missing. The field mirrors the second state because it is coherent. There is no contradiction in it. There is nothing to resolve. So reality arranges itself to match that internal consistency. This is why forcing feels exhausting. You are asking the field to contradict the identity you are embodying. You are saying one thing with your words and another with your state. The field always answers the state. Not because it is judging you, but because it has no other input. Recognition removes friction because it removes the split. When you recognize something at the identity level, you stop negotiating with reality. You stop proving. You stop chasing confirmation. And that absence of pressure is not passive. It is precise. It is the clearest signal you can send. Nothing needs to be added for this to work. No emotion needs to be amplified. No desire needs to be intensified. In fact, the moment you stop intensifying, the signal becomes readable. Calm coherence is louder to the field than frantic wanting ever could be. If this distinction is landing for you, notice how it feels. There is less urgency. Less strain. Less mental movement. That is not disengagement. That is alignment. And alignment is what the field has always been responding to, whether you were aware of it or not. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. Knowing something and understanding something feels similar in language, but they are completely different energetically. Knowing lives in the mind. Understanding lives in the body. Knowing collects. Understanding settles. And only one of them changes the way you relate to reality. You can know an idea for years without anything shifting. You can repeat it, explain it, even teach it. But if it remains only known, your emotional posture stays the same. Your reactions stay the same. Your sense of self stays the same. And because identity has not moved, the field has nothing new to respond to. This is why repetition without integration stalls reality. Repeating concepts from the same internal position does not create coherence. It reinforces the identity that is trying to get somewhere. The mind stays active, but the system does not relax. And without relaxation, there is no change in signal. Understanding is different because it resolves tension. When something is truly understood, the internal questioning stops. You don't need to remind yourself of it. You don't need to reinforce it. It feels obvious. Ordinary. Almost boring. And that is exactly why it works. The absence of mental effort is the evidence of integration. True understanding feels like exhaling. It feels like something clicking into place that no longer requires your attention. There is less urgency to apply it. Less desire to prove it. Less impulse to talk about it. The nervous system recognizes that there is no longer a problem to solve. And that recognition is what shifts your state. The field does not respond to how much information you have stored. It responds to how settled you are being. If knowing does not change how you feel, how you move, how you wait, or how you respond, then it is not understanding yet. It is still an idea waiting to be embodied. This is why forcing yourself to believe something never works. Belief without understanding requires constant maintenance. You have to remind yourself. Reaffirm it. Defend it. Understanding requires none of that. Once it lands, it holds itself. And because it holds itself, it stabilizes identity. When identity stabilizes, behavior follows naturally. You stop overcorrecting. You stop monitoring outcomes. You stop scanning for signs. Not because you are trying to be detached, but because there is nothing left to resolve internally. The field reflects that stability automatically. If you notice moments in your life where things shifted quietly, without fanfare, those moments came from understanding, not effort. Something inside you simply stopped arguing. And reality adjusted accordingly. Understanding does not energize you. It grounds you. It does not make you feel powerful. It makes you feel clear. And clarity is the most potent signal there is, because it contains no contradiction. If this distinction is landing, let it land fully. Do not rush to use it. Do not try to apply it. Let it settle. Because when understanding settles, the field already has its instruction. Before going any further, something needs to be clarified. Up to this point, what has been discussed could sound abstract or philosophical. This section is not that. This is where the mechanics are made explicit. Not mystical rules. Not beliefs. Actual operational logic. Because once you see how the field functions, confusion drops and effort becomes unnecessary. The quantum field is not reactive. It does not respond emotionally. It does not reward, punish, test, or evaluate you. It is neutral intelligence. It mirrors coherence. Nothing more. Nothing less. Most people assume the field reacts to actions, words, rituals, or intensity. That assumption creates endless activity with very little change. Reactivity implies stimulus and response. But the field does not wait for you to do something. It is constantly reflecting what is already stable within you. That is why frantic action rarely produces results, while quiet internal shifts often do. Action does not instruct the field. State does. When you speak words without coherence, the field reflects the incoherence. When you act without alignment, the field reflects friction. This is not because the field is opposing you, but because it has no ability to prioritize one signal over another. It mirrors the dominant pattern. And the dominant pattern is never what you say. It is what you are being. Coherence means there is no internal contradiction. Your emotional tone, your expectations, your sense of self, and your assumptions are aligned. In that state, there is nothing competing for expression. The signal is clean. And the field responds immediately, because there is nothing to correct or balance. This is why effort often backfires. Effort usually contains tension. Tension implies resistance. Resistance implies an opposing force. The field mirrors that opposition by producing obstacles, delays, or complexity. Not as punishment, but as symmetry. It matches what is present. Responsiveness, on the other hand, means the field adjusts as soon as coherence appears. No delay is required. No process needs to unfold. When the internal state stabilizes, the external configuration reorganizes to reflect it. This is why some changes feel instant and others never arrive. It is not about deserving. It is about consistency. Words do not create coherence. Actions do not create coherence. Even emotions do not create coherence by themselves. Coherence happens when there is no longer a split between what you feel, what you expect, and who you assume yourself to be. That alignment is silent. Subtle. But it is unmistakable to the field. The field does not need instructions. It needs clarity. And clarity is not something you generate. It is something that appears when resistance stops. When resistance stops, the field has nothing to push against. It reflects ease because ease is what is present. Once this is understood, there is nothing to manage. Nothing to perform. Nothing to convince. You stop asking how to make the field respond, because you see that it always has been. And from that recognition, your entire relationship with action, effort, and timing begins to change naturally. Emotion is not something to overcome. It is not noise in the system. It is the system speaking. The quantum field does not read your thoughts first. It reads your emotional state. Emotion is the most immediate and honest signal you broadcast, because it reflects what you are actually experiencing, not what you are trying to project. Most people have been taught to see emotion as a problem. If it is uncomfortable, it must be fixed. If it is heavy, it must be released. If it is intense, it must be controlled. But this approach misunderstands the role emotion plays. Emotion is not an obstacle to alignment. It is guidance toward it. Expansion and contraction are not moral categories. Expansion does not mean you are right. Contraction does not mean you are wrong. Expansion signals alignment with your current identity. Contraction signals misalignment. That is all. They are feedback mechanisms, not judgments. When you feel expansion, the body relaxes. The breath deepens. Attention widens. That state communicates coherence. The field mirrors it by opening pathways, synchronizing circumstances, and reducing friction. When you feel contraction, the body tightens. The mind narrows. The system is signaling that something about your current assumption, direction, or identity is out of alignment. The field mirrors that too, by slowing things down or creating resistance. The mistake is trying to eliminate contraction instead of listening to it. Suppressing emotion does not remove the signal. It distorts it. The field still receives the underlying incoherence, even if you cover it with positive language or forced optimism. This is why emotional bypassing produces instability. You are silencing the messenger while keeping the message active. Emotion does not ask you to fix it. It asks you to notice it. The moment you stop fighting an emotion, it begins to resolve on its own. Not because you did something to it, but because resistance was the only thing holding it in place. When resistance drops, the signal clarifies. This is how emotion becomes instruction. Expansion tells you to continue, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the direction is coherent with who you are being. Contraction tells you to pause, adjust, or release an assumption, not because something is wrong, but because something is misaligned. Both are useful. Both are precise. The field does not respond to emotional suppression or emotional dramatization. It responds to emotional honesty. When you allow yourself to feel what is present without trying to manipulate it, coherence begins to form naturally. Your system aligns. And the field reflects that alignment without delay. You do not need to chase positive emotion. You do not need to avoid negative emotion. You only need to stop arguing with what you feel. Emotion resolves when it is permitted. And resolution is what the field mirrors. If this reframing is landing, let it change how you relate to your internal experience. Emotion is not blocking your path. It is pointing it out. And when you treat it as guidance instead of resistance, everything begins to move with less effort. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this timeline. Letting go is often misunderstood as giving up, disengaging, or becoming passive. But what actually creates resistance is not action. It is control. Control is the attempt to manage outcomes from an identity that does not trust alignment. And that attempt is felt immediately by the system. The body tightens. The mind monitors. The emotional tone becomes vigilant. That vigilance is the signal the field responds to. Effort itself is not the problem. Effort layered on top of mistrust is. When effort is driven by the belief that something must be forced into place, it communicates opposition. The field mirrors opposition with delay, complexity, or friction. Not as a lesson, but as a reflection. Letting go does not mean doing nothing. It means releasing the internal grip that insists reality must comply on your terms. When that grip loosens, something precise happens. The nervous system settles. Emotional urgency dissolves. Attention widens. And in that widening, coherence appears. Allowing is not passive because it is not absent. It is present without tension. It is action without resistance. It is movement without insistence. From that state, responsiveness becomes immediate because the field no longer has to balance against pressure. Control is always future-oriented. It is trying to secure a result before alignment is established. Allowing is present-oriented. It trusts the current state enough to move without bracing. That trust is not naive. It is mechanical. A system without internal contradiction moves faster because there is nothing slowing it down. This is why forcing often feels heavy. You are carrying the weight of outcome management. You are holding the responsibility of timing, method, and result. Letting go releases that burden. Not onto something external, but back into coherence. And coherence is self-organizing. When you allow, you stop signaling urgency. Urgency implies danger or lack. The field reflects that by keeping you in situations that require more urgency. When urgency drops, the signal changes. Calm expectancy replaces pressure. And calm expectancy is readable. It is stable. It is easy for the field to mirror. Letting go does not remove desire. It removes attachment to how and when. Desire without attachment is clean. It does not distort the signal. It does not demand proof. It does not scan for progress. It rests. And resting is not stagnation. It is alignment. The paradox is simple. The more you try to make something happen, the more you confirm that it has not happened. The more you allow yourself to be aligned without monitoring the result, the faster reality rearranges to match that alignment. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped interfering. This is why responsiveness feels instant when it happens. There is no build-up. No warning. No struggle. Something releases internally, and the external adjusts as if it had been waiting. Because it was. Not for effort. For coherence. Letting go is not a technique. It is the absence of unnecessary force. And when force leaves the system, movement becomes natural. This is not surrender to fate. It is cooperation with how reality already functions. Creation does not move forward in time. That idea alone collapses most of what people think manifestation is. There is no future moment where reality catches up to you. There is only the present state you are occupying right now, and reality is always mirroring that state without delay. This section exists to make that clear, because once this is seen, waiting stops making sense. Nothing is created later. Outcomes do not travel toward you from the future. What you experience next is selected from what is available now, based on who you are being now. Time is not the delivery system. Identity is. And identity only exists in the present moment. Future-based manifestation assumes that if you think correctly long enough, something will eventually arrive. But that assumption quietly reinforces separation. It implies that fulfillment exists somewhere else, at some other time. The field mirrors that by keeping fulfillment positioned in the future. Not as punishment, but as accuracy. Creation happens through selection, not construction. At every moment, there are countless potential realities available. The one you experience is the one that matches your current identity. Not your goals. Not your plans. Not your intentions. Your identity. An identity is not a story you tell yourself. It is the emotional and perceptual position you are stabilized in right now. This is why trying to get to a future state often fails. You cannot become aligned later. Alignment is not a destination. It is a condition. And conditions are only ever present. When you shift how you are being now, the accessible reality shifts with it. Instantly. Waiting is unnecessary because nothing is in transit. There is no delay built into the system. The only thing that creates the experience of delay is holding an identity that assumes delay. When that assumption drops, time collapses. Response becomes immediate, because it always was. This does not mean everything changes at once. It means the direction of change is established immediately. The field begins reflecting coherence right away, even if the full expression unfolds through sequence. Sequence is not delay. It is organization. Identity is the access point because identity determines what feels normal, expected, and possible. Reality conforms to those expectations automatically. You do not have to believe this. You can test it by noticing how quickly circumstances rearrange when your internal posture changes without effort. The present moment is not a doorway to the future. It is the selection interface. Every time you relax into coherence now, you are not preparing for later. You are choosing differently. And that choice is reflected immediately, whether you are watching closely or not. Once this is understood, urgency dissolves. There is no race to manifest. No countdown. No pressure to get it right. There is only the clarity of now. And clarity is enough. Because reality is not waiting for time to pass. It is waiting for alignment to stabilize. Creation does not travel through time. It appears where coherence exists. Always now. Waiting feels harmless, but energetically it is precise. When you are waiting, you are not neutral. You are signaling that what you want exists somewhere else, at some other time, separate from you. That assumption is the broadcast. The field does not hear patience or hope. It hears separation. Waiting is not the absence of movement. It is a position. It is the stance of, not yet. And not yet is a stable identity state. When you hold it, the field reflects circumstances that keep you in that posture. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because the signal is consistent. Most people confuse waiting with trust. They tell themselves they are being patient, when in reality they are monitoring. They are checking timelines. They are scanning for signs. They are subtly braced for disappointment. That internal tension is not invisible. It is coherence of delay. And the field mirrors it accurately. Alignment does not wait. It expects without urgency. Calm expectancy is not passive, but it is unpressured. It does not lean forward. It does not lean away. It rests in the assumption that what is aligned does not need to be chased or scheduled. That assumption is the difference. When you are aligned, there is no internal countdown. There is movement without impatience. Attention is on what is present, not on what has not arrived. And because identity is stabilized in sufficiency rather than lack, the field reflects continuity rather than postponement. Waiting often feels like responsibility. As if staying vigilant will somehow ensure the outcome. But vigilance is tension. And tension implies uncertainty. The field mirrors uncertainty by keeping outcomes unresolved. Not to frustrate you, but to stay congruent with what is being expressed. Calm expectancy, by contrast, contains no negotiation. It does not ask when. It does not ask how. It does not need reassurance. It is grounded in the present state of alignment and allows sequence to unfold without interference. That lack of interference is not indifference. It is trust in coherence. This is why waiting feels heavy over time. You are carrying the weight of anticipation. You are holding space for something that you believe is missing. Calm expectancy feels light because nothing is being held. The outcome is not being managed. It is being allowed. The field responds quickly when waiting drops, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped broadcasting absence. The moment you are no longer oriented toward later, reality no longer has to keep things there. If you notice yourself waiting, do not correct it forcefully. Notice what assumption is underneath it. Usually it is the belief that fulfillment must be proven before you can relax. Alignment reverses that order. You relax first. And from that relaxation, reality catches up. Waiting signals misalignment because it is anchored in separation. Calm expectancy signals alignment because it is anchored in sufficiency. One prolongs delay. The other makes delay irrelevant. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of resistance. And that distinction matters, because most people associate stillness with stopping, withdrawing, or disengaging. But the still point is not passive. It is the moment where internal motion no longer contradicts itself. Nothing is being pushed. Nothing is being held back. The system becomes coherent. When resistance dissolves, there is nothing for reality to push against. This is why stillness is so powerful. Not because it does something, but because it removes what was interfering. The field does not need instruction at that point. It reorganizes automatically around the clarity that remains. Most internal noise is not caused by external circumstances. It is caused by micro-adjustments happening all the time. Monitoring. Correcting. Anticipating. Evaluating. Each of these introduces tension. Tension fragments coherence. And fragmented coherence produces fragmented outcomes. The still point appears when those micro-adjustments stop. Not through discipline, but through recognition. Something is seen clearly enough that effort becomes unnecessary. The mind quiets. The body softens. Attention rests where it is. And in that resting, alignment stabilizes. This is why stillness often arrives unexpectedly. You are not trying to get there. You simply stop interfering. And when interference stops, the field no longer needs to mirror friction. It mirrors ease instead. Not symbolically. Structurally. The still point is where identity becomes simple. You are no longer defining yourself through lack, pursuit, or resistance. You are not trying to become. You are simply being. And being, without contradiction, is the most coherent signal possible. From this point, reality rearranges without effort. Not all at once, and not dramatically, but decisively. Conversations shift. Opportunities appear. Timing synchronizes. None of it feels forced. None of it feels earned. It feels obvious, as if things are returning to their natural order. Stillness does not mean inaction. Action taken from stillness is precise. It is not rushed. It is not defensive. It does not need justification. Because it arises from coherence, the field supports it automatically. Movement flows because there is no internal drag. Many people chase stillness as a goal. But stillness cannot be achieved. It is uncovered. It is what remains when resistance is no longer fed. The moment you stop trying to arrive somewhere else, the still point is already here. This is why the deepest shifts often happen in quiet moments. Not during effort, but during surrender of unnecessary control. Not during striving, but during acceptance of what is present. The system rebalances itself when allowed to. The still point is not rare. It is always available. It is simply obscured by tension. When tension releases, even briefly, reality responds. And once you recognize this, you stop searching for change. You allow alignment to do what it naturally does. Timelines are often spoken about as if they are built piece by piece, through effort, intention, or persistence. That framing is misleading. You do not assemble a timeline. You do not construct a future. Timelines already exist as probability fields. What changes is which one you have access to. And access is determined by identity, not effort. This matters, because effort assumes creation is something you must do. Identity assumes creation is something you align with. The field does not wait for you to finish building a path. It reveals the path that matches who you are being. And that revelation happens continuously, not later. A timeline is not a destination in time. It is a pattern of likelihood. Certain experiences, relationships, opportunities, and outcomes cluster together based on coherence. When your internal state matches that coherence, you enter that cluster naturally. There is no jump. No shift you need to feel. Life simply begins to unfold differently. Most people try to force themselves into a timeline by changing behavior while keeping the same identity. They work harder. They think differently. They plan more carefully. But if the underlying sense of self does not change, the probability field remains the same. The field reflects consistency, not effort. Entering a timeline feels subtle. It does not announce itself. There is no dramatic moment of arrival. What changes first is what feels available. Certain options stop appearing. Others start showing up without being chased. You find yourself in situations that would not have aligned with your previous identity, even though nothing dramatic was done to get there. This is because identity acts as a filter. It determines what you notice, what you expect, and what you feel comfortable receiving. The field mirrors that filter perfectly. It does not ask what you want. It reflects what fits. You do not move through timelines by pushing forward. You move laterally, by shifting coherence. When coherence shifts, the set of probabilities you are aligned with shifts as well. This is why change can feel sudden without being chaotic. Something stabilizes internally, and the external world reorganizes around that stability. Effort tries to drag outcomes from one timeline into another. Identity allows you to step into the timeline where those outcomes already belong. One creates resistance. The other creates ease. The field always favors ease, because ease indicates coherence. This also explains why certain patterns repeat until something internal changes. You are not being tested. You are remaining within the same probability field because the identity that selects it is still active. When that identity relaxes or evolves, repetition stops without needing to be fixed. You do not need to know which timeline you are entering. You do not need to visualize it. You only need to notice who you are being consistently. That consistency is the access point. From there, reality responds automatically. Timelines are not earned. They are matched. And the moment your identity aligns with a different probability field, you are already there. Identity is the only lever that exists because it is the only thing that remains consistent. Behavior changes. Techniques come and go. Motivation rises and falls. But identity is the position you return to when nothing is being managed. And reality reflects that position with precision. Most people try to change outcomes by adjusting behavior. They act differently. Think differently. Apply new strategies. Sometimes this works temporarily. But when the behavior is not supported by identity, it collapses. The system reverts. The same patterns return. Not because something failed, but because the underlying signal never changed. Identity is not what you say you are. It is what feels natural to expect. It is the level of ease or resistance you have with certain experiences. It is the emotional baseline you default to when you are not trying. That baseline is the broadcast. And the field mirrors it automatically. This is why techniques fail without identity congruence. A technique asks you to perform from a position you do not yet inhabit. It requires effort to sustain. It needs reminders. It demands discipline. Identity does none of that. When identity shifts, behavior follows without force. What once required effort becomes obvious. You cannot maintain a reality that does not match who you believe yourself to be. Even if you reach it briefly, it will feel unstable. You will feel like you are holding it together. Monitoring it. Defending it. That strain is evidence of mismatch. And the field reflects mismatch by dissolving the situation. Stable realities emerge from stable identity. When something aligns with who you are being, it does not need to be protected. It stays because there is no internal pressure pushing against it. The field supports what is coherent. It destabilizes what is not. This is why changing identity feels subtle but profound. There is no announcement. No dramatic shift. What changes is what you tolerate, what you allow, what you expect without question. Those quiet shifts recalibrate the probability field you are aligned with. Identity is not built through effort. It is revealed through recognition. When you see something clearly enough, you stop identifying with what was never true. The false layer drops. And the identity beneath it stabilizes naturally. From that point, reality reorganizes without instruction. Trying to force identity through behavior creates tension. You are asking the system to maintain a position it does not believe in. That tension shows up as inconsistency, burnout, doubt, regression. Identity-based change has none of that. It feels calm, ordinary, unremarkable. And because it is unremarkable, it lasts. If you want to know what identity you are operating from, look at what repeats without effort. Look at what feels normal. Look at what you no longer question. That is the lever. Everything else is adjustment around it. Once this is understood, you stop searching for the right method. You stop collecting techniques. You stop fixing behavior in isolation. You pay attention to who you are being when nothing is being controlled. And from that clarity, change becomes inevitable. Identity is the only lever because it is the only thing the field consistently reads. Change that, and everything else follows. There is a phase that arrives quietly, without announcement, where reality begins to confirm you without effort. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Neutrally. Things line up. Responses come. Opportunities appear without being chased. And what surprises most people is not that it happens, but that it feels ordinary when it does. This phase only appears after identity has stabilized. Before that, confirmation feels urgent. You look for signs. You scan for proof. You interpret coincidences. That behavior is understandable, but it signals uncertainty. And uncertainty collapses alignment because it reintroduces monitoring. When the field is truly confirming you, you are not watching it closely. You are not asking what it means. You are not checking whether it will last. You simply notice that things are working, and then you move on. That neutrality is the signal. It communicates stability rather than need. Automatic confirmation does not feel exciting. It feels expected. That is how you know it is aligned. Excitement often carries anticipation. Anticipation leans forward. Neutrality rests. The field mirrors resting states far more consistently than energized ones. This is why chasing signs collapses alignment. When you look for confirmation, you imply that confirmation is not already stable. You turn response into reassurance. And reassurance requires repetition. The field mirrors that by creating cycles instead of continuity. Signs are not rewards. They are reflections. They show up naturally when coherence is present, and they disappear when they are no longer needed. If you cling to them, you anchor your identity to external feedback. That dependency destabilizes the signal. In this phase, confirmation is subtle. Conversations go smoothly. Timing works out. Decisions feel obvious. You are not trying to interpret reality. You are cooperating with it. And because there is no internal resistance, the field does not need to exaggerate feedback. The mistake many people make is thinking something is wrong when confirmation becomes boring. They expect fireworks. But fireworks require contrast. Alignment reduces contrast. It smooths experience. It normalizes what once felt distant. This is where trust matures. Not as belief, but as absence of doubt. You stop asking if you are on the right path because the question no longer arises. The field reflects that certainty by remaining consistent. Automatic confirmation does not mean everything is perfect. It means everything is coherent. Challenges may still appear, but they do not feel destabilizing. They feel navigable. That is because your identity is no longer in question. And when identity is stable, circumstances lose their power to shake you. If you find yourself wanting signs, do not judge it. Simply notice what assumption is active. Usually it is the belief that alignment must be proven repeatedly. True alignment does not need reinforcement. It holds itself. This phase is not something to aim for. It emerges naturally when chasing stops. When monitoring ends. When identity no longer needs validation. And once it arrives, the field does not need to get your attention anymore. It simply moves with you. Confirmation becomes background noise. And that is how you know it is real. Most people relate to the quantum field as if it is something they are inside of. As if they are a person moving through a larger system, trying to influence it from within. That assumption is the final layer of separation. And it is subtle enough that it often goes unquestioned. This section exists to dissolve it. You are not inside the field. The field appears within awareness. And that awareness is what you are. Up to this point, everything discussed has operated within a functional model: identity, coherence, alignment, timelines. All of that is accurate at the level of experience. But now the frame shifts. Not to add complexity, but to remove the last misunderstanding. The idea that there is something out there responding to you. When you believe you are inside the field, you naturally relate to it as an external intelligence. You try to influence it. Interpret it. Work with it. But the field is not something you are interacting with from the outside. It is something you are perceiving from the inside of consciousness itself. Awareness is not located in the field. The field is located in awareness. This is not philosophical. It is experiential. Every sensation, thought, emotion, and perception appears in awareness. The field is known only because it is perceived. That means awareness is primary. And what is primary is not affected by what appears within it. When this is recognized, effort collapses at a deeper level. You are no longer trying to get reality to respond to you, because you see that reality is already appearing within what you are. The sense of being a separate agent softens. And with it, the need to manage outcomes dissolves. This does not make life passive. It makes it precise. Action still happens. Choices are still made. But they arise from clarity instead of control. There is no longer a sense of pushing against something external. Experience unfolds within awareness, and awareness remains unchanged. The reason this matters is simple. As long as you believe you are inside the field, you will try to fix your relationship with it. As soon as you recognize yourself as awareness, the relationship resolves on its own. There is nothing to negotiate with. Nothing to align with. Nothing to impress. This is the point where effort truly ends. Not because you stop engaging with life, but because the internal struggle to influence life is no longer necessary. You are not waiting for the field to respond. You are noticing what is already appearing. From this position, coherence is natural. There is no contradiction between observer and observed. Identity relaxes. And when identity relaxes, the field reorganizes effortlessly, because there is no longer a sense of separation generating resistance. You do not need to hold on to this understanding. You do not need to repeat it. If it lands, it lands. And if it does, something fundamental shifts. You stop seeing yourself as a participant trying to navigate reality, and recognize yourself as the awareness within which navigation occurs. That recognition does not change the world by force. It changes it by removing the illusion that anything was ever outside of you to begin with. There is a subtle belief that keeps people in effort long after alignment has stabilized. The belief that something out there is responding to them. Watching. Deciding. Evaluating. As if reality is a system that reacts to performance. This belief keeps the sense of being judged, tested, or rewarded alive. And as long as that sense remains, separation remains. Nothing is responding to you. There is no external intelligence tracking your progress. There is no force deciding whether you are worthy, ready, or aligned enough. What you experience is a mirror. And mirrors do not respond. They reflect. When you see reality as responsive, you unconsciously assign it agency. You assume it has intention, preference, memory. But the field has none of that. It does not hold opinions about you. It does not remember your past. It does not anticipate your future. It reflects what is present now. This is why effort often feels like performance. You are trying to trigger a response. You are adjusting yourself to get something to happen. But reflection does not work that way. It does not need convincing. It does not require consistency. It does not care about improvement. It simply shows what is. Once this is seen, a deep relief appears. You are no longer being evaluated. There is no exam. No final test. No reward system. You stop asking whether you are doing it right. You stop wondering if you have aligned enough. The entire framework of judgment collapses. Reflection is neutral. If confusion is present, confusion is mirrored. If clarity is present, clarity is mirrored. If resistance is present, resistance is mirrored. Not to teach you a lesson, but because that is the only function of a mirror. It cannot do otherwise. This is why trying to change the mirror never works. You can adjust behavior, language, and strategy endlessly, but if the underlying state remains unchanged, the reflection remains the same. When the state shifts, the reflection shifts instantly, without commentary. The sense of being tested comes from identity, not reality. It arises when you believe you are a separate entity trying to meet an external standard. When that belief dissolves, the idea of judgment dissolves with it. There is no standard to meet. There is only coherence to notice. Reward and punishment are interpretations layered on top of reflection. They are human concepts projected onto a neutral system. When something works, you call it a reward. When something resists, you call it a lesson. But the field is not teaching. It is mirroring. When you stop personalizing reflection, experience becomes lighter. You no longer take outcomes as commentary on your worth or alignment. You see them as information. And information can be adjusted without drama. This is the completion of the mirror model. Nothing is happening to you. Nothing is responding to you. Everything is showing you what is active within you. And once this is understood, the need to manage reality disappears. You are not being watched. You are being reflected. And reflection requires no effort to maintain. This is where the loop closes. Not because something new is being added, but because nothing more is needed. Understanding returns to itself. What began as a distinction now completes as recognition. And in that completion, activation is no longer a concept. It is already done. From the beginning, this was never about changing reality. It was about seeing what was already shaping it. Understanding was not presented as information to apply, but as something that, once seen, changes how you stand in relation to everything. That shift was the activation. Not later. Not after practice. The moment it landed. A circuit only works when it is closed. As long as something is being sought, the circuit remains open. Seeking implies distance. Distance implies effort. Effort implies resistance. Understanding closes the distance. And when distance collapses, the system stabilizes. Nothing in this video was meant to be remembered, repeated, or used as a method. Methods keep the loop open. Instructions imply future application. But what you have been pointed to operates immediately, because it is about recognition, not action. If something in you has relaxed during this process, that was not motivation fading. That was coherence settling. The moment you stopped trying to get somewhere, the system no longer had to keep you in motion. And when motion ceased internally, response reorganized externally. This is why understanding completes the loop. It removes the need for more understanding. It does not ask you to do anything with it. It simply alters the position you are operating from. And from that position, reality behaves differently without needing explanation. You are not meant to hold on to this. Holding implies effort. Effort implies mistrust. Let it dissolve into what feels obvious. What remains does not need reinforcement. It holds itself. And because it holds itself, the field mirrors it consistently. If you find yourself wanting to apply this, pause. Application assumes separation. Recognition does not. Recognition simply notices what was already true. And that noticing is enough. The loop is complete when nothing is being added, nothing is being removed, and nothing is being sought. There is only clarity. And clarity is not active. It is present. From presence, coherence arises naturally. From coherence, response follows automatically. This was never a message. It was a mirror. If you saw yourself clearly in it, the work is already done. Not because you finished something, but because you stopped trying to start it. Stay here. Not as a practice, but as a recognition. And allow reality to continue doing what it always does when resistance is gone. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before their timeline closes.